Welcome to the Balls Talk Sports NFL podcast. I'm Elson Gratz, joined by Victor Ratliff. And Victor, 'tis the season, the postseason. It's wild card weekend. We know things are going to get wild. Fortunately, that's just how we like it. Victor, are you ready to get kinky?
I am. It's playoff football. There's no better time of the year. Everybody had their Christmas a couple weeks ago. This is our Christmas. Let's get into some playoff talks.
Before the playoff talks, did you hear that we got a late Christmas present? Deshaun Watson tore his ACL again.
Yes, football fans winning on and off the field right now. Got some great matchups, and we got, truly great things happening off the field. Couldn't happen to a more deserving person, honestly.
You never want to hear about players getting hurt, but there is some good news. Apparently, this is a more clean tear, like perfectly clean and symmetrical, like the kind of tear you'd get if you just cut the Achilles with a knife. So we'll leave it at that. This is the
Yeah,
first week, long time, without any rough games on the slate. How many games do you think we're going to disagree on here, if any?
I do think we'll disagree. Well, I think we will probably disagree on a couple. I don't know. We may end up having the same exact six picks. I do think we'll disagree at least on how one or two games go at the very least. So it's when you've got this many great teams with so many different philosophies, so many things can happen. It's so exciting.
It's going to be a blast. I want to go in chronological order, and that means we'll start things off on Saturday with the 11-6 Chargers taking on the 10-7 Houston Texans. The Chargers lay in a full field goal on the road. Since we do have a little bit more time, just doing a quick injury report on all these games, the Chargers are beat up. They're down Josh Palmer, they're down Elijah Molden and Jasir Taylor in the secondary, and Quentin Johnston, J.K. Dobbins, Trey Pipkins, and Denzel Perriman all have a very real chance of sitting this one out. Not the same story for Houston. Shaq Mason on the interior is the only player that they're missing. However, that's kind of the name of the game for the Texans. It's can their offensive line hold up for me? Because the Chargers can absolutely get after the quarterback, and that has been the Texans' downfall. CJ Stroud has garnered a ton of flack for some of the bad decisions he's made under pressure. But that's just such a tough way to live when you're running for your life every play, and the Chargers know how to capitalize on those sorts of mistakes.
Exactly. The Chargers love to blitz, and they're really good when they do blitz. I mean, I think they're third in pressure rate in the league whenever they're blitzing. So whenever Minter brings all those guys, they're really hard to stop. And against an offensive line that is not protected against the blitz well this year, a quarterback that has not made good decisions against the blitz this year, that is an absolute must for Houston. They need to mitigate this part of the game. They need to mitigate the pressure, and they need to keep Stroud relatively clean for most of the game, especially the big downs, if they want a shot. Because I do think if they can do that, this game is really interesting. But if Stroud is getting hit all night or all afternoon because it's Saturday afternoon, playoff tradition like no other, Houston's in the Saturday at 3:30 slot, right? But if they can't do that, then Stroud's gonna have a rough day, and Texans fans are gonna have a rough day. That's the biggest thing for me. Houston needs to pass protect.
One way you can kind of take some of the heat off your quarterback is by establishing a good run game. The pass rushers can't quite pin their ears back as much. You have to respect the run a little bit more. The Texans have really struggled with that because they do have one of the squishier offensive lines in the league. Do you think that they can get a consistent run game going behind Joe Mixon against the Chargers?
I struggle to see how they can. I mean, like you said, this is kind of a softer run blocking offensive line, right? This isn't a line that's going to go out there and look really nasty. I mean, they're NFL players, so they're going to hit, but compared to what the Chargers defense brings down in, down out, what Harbaugh and Minter have built as a culture in that defense, I think that they might get outworked, and that's going to be tough for a run game that's kind of limping into the playoffs right now. They have had no semblance of consistency or really any strength in the run over the past few weeks. So yeah, another thing, you want to be able to run the ball, especially if you're going to get blitzed a lot. But they've shown no ability to run the ball against good defenses over the past few weeks, and the Chargers are a really good defense. So that's another issue of concern for Houston.
Obligatory Puna Ford shout out.
Yeah.
I
And Khalil Mack against the run, Joey Bosa against the run. They're both really hard players to stop, especially if you want Mixon, who, sometimes he has a tendency to bounce it to the outside. Khalil Mack's not going to let you do that.
And the Chargers know how to load up the box with bodies as well. Like, I don't really want to be accounting for Derwin James in the run fit. They know that this is a weakness for Houston, and they're going to make the Texans hit throws over top. Now, can CJ Stroud work over the top to Nico Collins if he's got a little bit of time? Yeah, I mean that can be a one-play touchdown. But who are the Texans' other pass catching options? The ghost of Robert Woods, Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, right? That's their top four wide receivers.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think they got Schultz at the tight end position still, though I think he was hurt at one point.
Those
Let
are
me
good
see.
backs for the Chargers, in my opinion.
I agree because I trust James or Henley to carry Schultz, and really the only thing that you're really worried about, I think, if you're Jesse Minter and the Chargers, is how are we going to stop Nico Collins? Because you've got a good group of corners, right? Tariq Still, Cam Hart, Christian Fulton, Derwin James in the slot. Sometimes those guys are all good players, but I don't think you really have a guy that when it comes down to it, you want to blitz. Let's put him one-on-one against Nico Collins in man coverage, and we can trust that.
That's very true. The reason that I'm so bearish on the Texans offense, though, is in order to get vertical and hit a big shot play to Nico. Now, can you hit him on a slant and he breaks a tackle? Yeah, that's very possible. But to hit him on a go ball, you need some time. And I just don't think that the Texans are going to have that. I think it's going to be very rare, at least. I think this is going to be a rough day for their offense. However, Chargers offense on the other end, I'm not super excited for them either. They know how to beat up on bad teams. They know how to get a run game going when there is a run game to be got going. That's the most roundabout sentence of all time. But the Texans have healthied up a little bit on the interior offensive line. They've got Tim Settle back. They've got Folu Fadakasi back. Mario Edwards, I don't know if he missed any time, but I think he was their starter for quite a while. It's still a bad interior group, but if they can slow down J.K. Dobbins, if the Chargers are going to be without Josh Palmer, possibly without Quentin Johnston, and basically the entire offense is slot fades and slants to Lad McConkey, that's maybe not super conducive to success either. I think we could have a low scoring affair.
I agree. The Chargers' game plan is going to be I'm going to run the I want to they're going to want to run the ball a lot tomorrow because we are recording this Friday night, so games are tomorrow. We're going to get it out Friday night too. So if you're listening at midnight or something, respect it. But yeah, you need
all the getting it out tonight is Victor, by the way.
well, you know what? We're also going to have some pretty cool Instagram graphics out maybe. So that's all Elson. What you see in the social media is the cool stuff. By the way, follow Elson at Psychics NFL at Instagram. Some absolutely incredible stuff going on over there. But yeah, back to the game, running the ball. That is what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. And against, again, a Texans defense that they're a lot more, they've got more energy, more fight to them than I think the Texans offensive line does. And I think that's a reflection of D'Amico Ryans being a very good coach and inspiring a lot of will to play from his players, right? But still, there's just not a lot of talent, especially there's not a lot of run defense on that defensive line. There's a couple of guys in the pass rush game who, they can put up they've put up solid seasons, but when it comes to defending the run, they just haven't looked like they've known what they're doing. And I think Harbaugh's going to exploit that really well. We're going to run at their weaknesses, which is pretty much everywhere. Where they're going to run a lot of the inside. They're going to run a lot of ISO, right? They love to run the ISO with Gus Edwards. And when they're going to avoid running to Will Anderson, which has really been their strongest run defender this year. So I think it'll be low scoring, but if it is a low scoring affair, I think that benefits the Chargers more because also it's like if you get into high scoring, who's going to do all of the scoring for you if you're Los Angeles? Herbert can't throw and catch the ball, and McConkey in his first playoff game, I just don't know if I could trust he's going to be that elite bucket getter you need to make the play when it matters. So I think it benefits them to keep this a low scoring, hard fought affair because if it comes down who wants it more, I'm going to take LA every time.
You covered it with the Chargers are just kind of going to run it where they're not. They are one of the more multiple run teams in the NFL. And some days they're going to work to the perimeter. Some days they're going to work through the A and B gap. And I think that this is going to be one of those inside run focused scripts, especially if they can attack the Texans linebackers a little bit. That's another advantage. What I'm most concerned about when playing the Texans defense, it's two factors. The first one is Derek Stingley Jr. He's been maybe not an eraser on his side of the field, but second team All-Pro caliber. He's perimeter only. He's not
Well,
going to be.
The All Pros came out today, and he earned the first team All Pro nod.
He, yeah, because you got two corners. Well, I guess three corners if you consider Nickelback. I guess second best corner in the NFL, but the gap between him and Pat Surtain is like an ocean.
It is large. Yeah.
So very good corner, but he's going to be on the outside, which I don't think is going to be a huge factor for them anyway. And then you have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, just truly one of the top pass rush duos in the NFL. But who are they rushing against? Rashawn Slater and Joe Walsh. I don't think that they're going to eliminate those two players from the game. That's just not really attainable. But I think that they slow down Hunter and Anderson enough that Herbert can manage the pocket. He can make good decisions because he has been nails for, I don't know, the last 3/5 of the season. Ever since he got comfortable with the scheme, he's been playing virtually mistake-free. And the Texans have been playing the opposite of mistake-free. I think that this is overall, even though they have some injuries, a very favorable matchup for the Chargers. I've got them 20-13 in a low-scoring battle.
I mean, I think you hit it on the head. This Texans defense, they run through three guys, and it's, well, four guys, kind of. They run through, let's get Anderson and Hunter, let's get them the most favorable matchup, let's unleash them on the quarterback. Once the quarterback gets nervous, he's going to throw an errant ball. Stingley's going to use his great ball hawking ability to pick it off, or Kalen Bullock's going to hawk it over the middle.
Oh, you got it before me. I was going to raise my hand, and I was going to say, is the fourth guy Kalen Bullock?
Yeah, well, you know what? We talked about him on the Pro Bowl episode, so you know what? I'm glad he's getting the recognition now. But yeah, Kalen Bullock's the fourth guy because he's going to hawk it over the middle, and that's an issue here because Slater and Alt are so good. I believe, actually, I don't think Slater got an All-Pro nod, which is just insane to me. He didn't even get because Wirfs was the first team left tackle. I don't remember who was the second team. Maybe it was Tunsil, but Slater did not get it. I don't think he got a nod. Maybe that'll make him pissed off. But Slater and Alt can limit Anderson and Hunter in a way that most teams can't. So that could easily just send the Texans defense crumbling to the ground because that's the foundation. Get pressure, have our elite ball hawks get the ball back for us.
The Texans have the high-end talent, but if the Chargers can control the chaos, I think Houston's a bit of a paper tiger, and I've got a lot of faith that the Bolts get it done on the road.
Agreed. I've got it 25-20 Los Angeles. So I've got the Los Angeles. I'm picking them to win and cover the spread by like a hair.
So 25 points. Is that a touchdown and then 6 Dicker the Kicker field goals?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. Sometimes I just throw numbers at the board because I don't want every score to look chalk.
I do the same.
Yeah, no shame I think 6 Dicker the Kicker field goal sounds reasonable. I think it does.
He's awesome this year. He's been, I think, top 5 in the NFL. He's been excellent long range. He's a drive finisher when the offense drives in its own right.
Having that stable presence for the Chargers at kicking, because that's been an awful position for them for as long as I can remember watching football. They've just never had a guy like Badgley a couple of years ago. He had like one good year, but other than that, I can't remember a good Chargers kicker. So Dicker's been a breath of fresh air, and you just know you're getting the 3 points when he steps up to kick it. That cannot be overstated how important that is to have trust in your kicker, especially in the playoffs.
Just as kind of a last note on this game, Jim Harbaugh essentially putting an end to charging in year 1 has been stellar to watch. And it's not charging meaning choking away games and bad special teams play. It's the overarching softness we saw with the previous regime. This went from an offense that never felt like they were getting the most out of their players and a defense that you could just walk all over to being a mistake-avoiding, beat up the bad teams, win all the winnable games sort of offense, and a defense that's opportunistic. They play hard. They force mistakes. It's been awesome to see.
I mean, it really has. That record, 11-6, these players have put in a lot of work, but I do believe it's reflective of how good of a job Jim Harbaugh has done and how good of a job Jesse Minter's done with the defense. And you know what? When we do our Balls Talk Awards show, when we talk about the finalists for Coach of the Year and Defensive Assistant Coach of the Year, I think we're going to mention both of those guys' names, even if they don't win it, because they've just done a heck of a job this year.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Next up, we've got a series tiebreaker in the AFC North. The 10-7 Steelers headed to Baltimore, taking on the 12-5 Ravens. You seen the spread for this one?
Yeah, 9.5. I think it was.
9.5 with Zay Flowers out and the Steelers almost completely healthy. I kind of get it. The Steelers' offense has been in hell recently. They've looked like not just a high variance unit, but an authentically bad one. I still think this winds up being a much closer game because I have concerns about what the Ravens are going to look like with Zay Flowers out. I know this is a very high powered offense, but being able to be multiple, where they can hit you downfield and they can hit you over the intermediate part of the field, and then, well, guess what? They've got Derrick Henry in their back pocket. That multifacetedness does so much for a team that just doesn't have elite overall pass catchers. You remove Zay Flowers from that equation, and now the wide receiver one is Rashad Bateman. You're probably looking at Mark Andrews as the team's top pass catcher. Still going to be really good, but not the same unit that we're used to, especially because what does the Steelers defense do extremely well? Well, they rush the passer, but they've also been a stellar run defense, especially at the line where, you can tag Derrick Henry in the backfield and knock him down before he's built up speed.
Yeah, absolutely. The Flowers injury, him being out, is really concerning for me. Now, cards on the table. I was going to pick, before I saw the Flowers injury, I was going to pick Ravens to cover the spread. Because just the way that the way the Ravens are playing both offensively and defensively, that defensive turnaround has been incredible. We will get to that in a minute or so. But the way they're playing versus how the Steelers have just kind of like dragged themselves into the playoffs, 4-game losing streak, it's just there couldn't be this. If I had to pick one blowout in the entire slate, I think it's the game on Saturday night. I do think it's Baltimore-Pittsburgh. But without Flowers, some of that offensive firepower, some of that offensive explosion that Baltimore really relies on him for, those 40-yard touchdowns, that those yards after the catch are so invaluable. Without those, I think this ends up being a slightly more low-scoring game. I still think Baltimore's going to win by, I have it 26-19 because it's always a weird score with Pittsburgh, right? There's never a normal-looking football score. The Pittsburgh game will never end 28-24. It's always going to be weird. But yeah, I like Baltimore to win pretty comfortably, but I do think it'll be a slightly more low-scoring affair, at least on Baltimore's end. And they will control the game. It's just not going to look as pretty.
I really think that you covered it well there. I also had the Ravens to cover the spread before the Zay Flowers injury because, the last Ravens-Steelers game had a big spread. I don't remember what that was, and I pretty comfortably picked the Ravens to cover that, and they did because pretty much this entire year, I have thought that the Ravens and the Steelers were in different classes. It didn't really show up in that first matchup where the Steelers won. I thought that was an excellent performance from the Steelers' defense, creating some turnovers. But their offense, what stuck out to me the most in that game, they couldn't finish in the red zone. I still feel like I don't know for sure what the Steelers' offense is because they've been atrocious over the past 4 to 5. I don't have the points per game figure in front of me. They were very feast or famine previously. They feasted for a while. Now they've hit a period of famine. I just don't know if they're truly as bad as we've seen. George Pickens is back. He was terrible in the last game the Steelers played against the Bengals. The Steelers need to be able to put up points on bad defenses. They couldn't put up numbers on the Chiefs when they didn't have Chris Jones. But I still think this is an offense that can have some success moving the ball. That's why my swing factor is George Pickens. He can't sell like he did against the Bengals. He needs to be an effective vertical presence, and they need to get shot plays to him because they're not going to have the run game to fall back on. It's going to be a tough script for the Steelers, but if they can just bottle up the Ravens a little bit, I think this can be a classic lower-scoring AFC North showdown.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think the shot plays, this team lives and dies with the shot play, and that has been the George Pickens call all year. It's been, let's get the ball to George Pickens on a over-the-shoulder moon ball from Russ. But Pickens, 2 games he's been back in. I have the stats somewhere here. Pickens, he's got 4 catches for 50 yards on 13 targets since returning from injury. That's just straight up awful. You know what? Ever since I picked him as a Pro Bowler and our Pro Bowl spectacular, he has not done anything. I honestly, Pittsburgh
He
fans, you
put it
can
on the
blame me.
bulletin board, but like in the opposite way that you expect. Did you see his draft night video?
Yeah,
He was making that pose, just staring at it, and he said, "I'm
yeah,
gonna
he
nobody."
got too far in his head, man. But yeah, this team lives and dies with the shot play, and even when Russ is hitting that consistently, which he hasn't been over the past few weeks, if Pickens can't haul it in, then you have to rely on a Calvin Austin or a Mike Williams to consistently do that. And maybe they can do it once. But the problem here is if you want to keep pace with Baltimore, you're not just going to need one shot play. You're probably going to need two or three big ones to at least you get down in the red zone and give you some points or a touchdown, right? You're going to need to rely on these high variance plays, which have not gone Pittsburgh's way more frequently. And with what looks to be not declining skills of Russell Wilson, because he's been playing like this all season, he's just been playing bad defenses. And once people remembered, okay, we can just blitz Russell Wilson and he will crumble immediately, then we've started to see a little bit of that regression, right? But we saw it last week in the big moment against Cincinnati. They had a chance to get in field goal range and win it, and Russ just missed the ball. Wide open George Pickens. Who knows if he would have caught it, but he missed it. It sailed into the third row of the stands, and you just can't do that for a playoff team. So I have serious concerns about the Steelers having to move the ball. And when they did win against Baltimore, that was literally pretty much everything going right defensively for it to happen, for you to even scrape out a win. So I don't think that's going to happen against the Baltimore team that's playing at the best they've looked all season. So I like Baltimore to win this one. Probably, I think this is the most confident I am about any game this weekend.
It's the pressure, man. Lamar Jackson, he's going to be under pressure. The Steelers are going to get theirs on this, average at best Ravens offensive line. But throughout the season, he has been an exceptional pressure mitigator, not just as far as breaking the pocket and extending plays, doing damage with his legs, doing damage throwing on the move, but in being smart, in avoiding the turnovers. In that game where I think he had 2 or 3 turnovers against the Steelers, one of them was a perfect throw to Justice Hill where Peyton Wilson just rips it out of Hill's lap. That's not a bad play against the quarterback. If we see that smart, composed version of Lamar, this one could be a blowout because on the other end, Russell Wilson leans into the pressure. And I don't mean like he leans into it and makes his pressure mitigation a strength. I mean, he runs directly into the pressure and fumbles the football. I think you've convinced me to be even more confident than I previously was. I've got Baltimore 24-16 at home. However, and I think this narrative is overplayed, we do have to see the regular season version of Lamar in this game. Is that something you're at all concerned about?
So yeah, that's kind of. I am a little concerned because this narrative, I don't believe it's overplayed because when you watch Lamar in the playoffs, I mean, he's not like a choker or anything. He's just not been Lamar. He's been a league average quarterback in the playoffs, and that's not who Lamar is. Regular season Lamar, I don't think it's a stretch to say he's been a top 3 pocket passer this year. I don't think it's a stretch to say that he should win MVP, though we will have the MVP discussion, and Josh Allen should also win MVP, right? They both deserve it. But Jackson's playing at the top of his game. But that playoff thing, it's real. We've seen it 3 seasons now where he's just not played up to par in the playoffs. But I think this is the year. I think this is the year we finally dispel some of those issues. And if I had to pick a team to come out of the AFC right now, I think I'm picking Baltimore. So I think that should tell you I do believe in Lamar in the postseason. I do believe in Baltimore in this playoff run.
Regular season Lamar this year has been video game-esque because
one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen.
Fantastic from the pocket, but somehow even better making plays outside it. He will punish you with his legs like essentially no other quarterback in football. I know that he doesn't have, say, the scramble yard stats. That's because he's too busy beating teams with his arm, which I think is a hilarious problem to have. And I think he's turning the ball over at the lowest rate in football. If we get 90% of that, this should be a big Baltimore win. And he has the ultimate chance to prove that, yeah, I can be that guy in the postseason too against a divisional rival.
I totally agree. And, last thing to say about this game, Pittsburgh's put up 18 and 17 on them. And you know what? They put up 17 on this Baltimore defense when they were starting to improve. They put up 16. They put up 18 on this defense when they were still awful. This Baltimore defense's turnaround has been one of the most impressive things I've seen from any unit in the league this year. What Zach Orr has done with this unit to bring them back from, honestly, you remember how we were talking about them midseason, right? This is like a bottom 5 unit. They just looked awful. It seems like every episode we had we found some way to shit talk Brandon Stevens. But now
Bad.
but now they've made some changes. Somehow Brandon Stevens looks, may I even say, serviceable right now, right? They're playing
Secondary, and they let the front seven hold its own. It's working
exactly.
great.
They moved Humphrey to the slot full time, and they're giving Nate Wiggins a lot more play time, and it's definitely working. They kicked Eddie Jackson's ass to the bench, finally, and they've replaced him with Ardarius Washington, I believe a day 3 pick or day 2 pick a few years ago, and he's looked real good this year in that system. They moved Kyle Hamilton back to box safety full time rather than playing in the nickel, playing linebacker majority of the plays. That's just helped us feel like there's just a more cohesive unit now. Nnamdi Madubuike has had a fantastic stretch of these last 6 games, and they're defending the run. I think they're like top 5 in EPA per pass allowed over this last 6 to 10 game stretch, I believe. What they've been doing, how these players are playing now that Orr shifted the scheme around, was he was able to admit when it wasn't working and he changed things up. It's just nothing short of incredible. And that's why I believe in Baltimore so much, not just because you got a superhuman at quarterback, but because you got a defense that has been through adversity and is now showing that they can be an elite defense on any given day.
I agree with everything you said, except for your comment about Eddie Jackson. They didn't kick his ass to the bench. They kicked his ass to the street.
Did they?
They cut him. He's on the Chargers now.
Well deserved.
It's funny because, like, getting banished to the Chargers used to be a legitimate punishment, and now it's like, oh, look for the Chargers.
Well, I mean, now you got a shot.
Not the Ravens, but still.
Yeah, I mean, you still got a shot, but with all those safeties in that room, he's not going to lick a playing time.
Thank God. Now let's move into Broncos Bills. Not so long ago, one of these teams was a perennial underperformer. Then they drafted a highly criticized QB just outside the top 5, and I'd say it's worked out pretty well for him. The rest is history. The other team is the Buffalo Bills, who are 13-4 and favored by 8.5 at home. Victor, take this one away.
Man, it's good to be back in the playoffs. I've missed what it's like to care in January, right? Like, there's actually, I give a shit about these games.
Bengals, the Denver Broncos.
I can't believe that we're here. First year of Bo Nix, but we are, and I think I'm excited. Last week when we got into the playoffs, I was like, I don't care. I want to get in. If we're in, I don't care what happens. I think we'll lose 42-10. I was saying to everybody, listen, when we got in the playoffs, we're going to lose 42-10. I don't care. I have since retracted that statement after looking at this game because I really went into this expecting to pick a Bills blowout. I went into this trying to forego my Broncos bias and put a little bit of Bills bias on. And I still came to the conclusion that this game is going to be real close.
Victor, I felt almost the exact same way. My big question here is, can the Broncos win the trenches? Because the defense is going to make things tough on Josh Allen. But when things are tough on Josh Allen, he traditionally rises to the occasion and puts up a bunch of points. The best defense against Josh Allen is to keep him off of the football field entirely. If they can hand the ball to Audric Estime, Quinn Miners generates some push on the interior, you go at a beat-up Bills linebacker room. Side note, both these teams are almost completely healthy. The Bills lost, I think, was Balin Spector a starter for them, kind of rotate in?
Yeah, he was a rotational guy mostly. I think now that Milano came back, he's like the third stringer. He's the third guy in the lineup, but he's still got some playing time.
Well, now he's on IR. However, you mentioned Matt Milano being back. I don't think he's playing at 100%. I haven't loved what I've seen.
I don't think so either.
If you can get pullers at the second level, you can get your backs in space. I think that there is damage to be done on the ground. The question is, can the Broncos pull that off, especially against the Bills' defensive line that you can really only attack them up the middle because Greg Rousseau has been fantastic in run defense. If Denver can control time of possession, if they can play smart, avoid mistakes, this one's going to be close.
Oh yeah, it is, and I like what you said. You can only attack him up the middle because Craig Rousseau is such an elite run defender off the edge, but that middle is so vulnerable. This Buffalo team, it seems like for the last 4 or 5 years, since they've been in playoff Super Bowl contention with Josh Allen, they just can't find an interior run defender to save their lives. I believe it was 2 years ago, because this was the game against the Bengals. Daquan Jones was having a good stretch, and he was looking like a run defender. Like, he could be a top 16 interior run stopper, but man, he got injured, and the Bengals destroyed them on the ground. It was a massive Joe Mixon game. Burrow hardly had to throw the ball. They moved on easily. I don't think you can that's why I'm not the highest on the Bills going far this postseason, because I just don't think that they're going to be able to stop the run on a consistent basis. And the Broncos, Sean Payton is going to exploit that. This run game for Denver has been really inconsistent this year, but when it's working, it's looked really good, and it's been working a lot more towards the end of the year. They're hitting their stride at the right time. And if they can run the ball consistently up the middle, like they like to do, this isn't like a massive outside zone team or anything. They like to run the power, the counter, and they like to run ISO in inside zone, a lot of inside zone. So if they can do that to a weak Bills run defense, not a weak Bills run defense, but a weak interior defensive line, because Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, they're just not great run stoppers at this point in their careers. So if they can do that, they can control the pace of the game. I think the Josh Allen issue on the other side kind of gets mitigated a little bit, because if you say, we're just going to have the ball for 40 minutes and you guys can get the ball for 20 minutes and do your Josh Allen thing, this game's going to be close no matter what. Okay? And we're cool. If this is a close game and we need a defense to get a stop, Sean Payton is going to trust his defense to get a stop more than I think Sean McDermott's going to trust his defense to get a stop in Denver. So if this one's close, Denver could really take this.
I think that we maybe disagree a little bit on the Bills. I think that establishing a good ground game on them is a good way to set the tone for a close game. But when are the games this year where that's actually resulted in a win? I mean, the Texans game sort of, but I think that the Bills were just too undermanned in the receiving room in that game to keep it close. I think maybe we both picked the Texans in that game because the Bills were so beat up. I think the script for beating the Bills, and I say this with a little bit of pause because of how this game went, but it's how the Rams did it, where they just out-boat raced them. Now, I don't think the Broncos are going to do that, but if they can have a good ground game, they can pull the safeties down a little bit, they can bring the linebackers in, the edge rushers can't pin their ears back, and then you get Bo Nix a clean pocket, you give him some shots downfield. Courtland Sutton is going to be going toe-to-toe with Christian Benford. Okay, but what about Marvin Mims? He's been getting hot at the right time. I think that the Broncos are going to need a few long touchdowns or at least a few chunk plays through the air in this game. I think that they can get them. I think that that's going to be a very active aspect of the Broncos offense. And that's why I have so much faith that this one isn't going to be a blowout, because I've been impressed by what I've seen from Bo Nix.
I totally agree. I mean, I think you cannot, this game's not going to be 16-14, right? I have it 27-23, and I think Buffalo's going to win it, because ultimately Bo Nix and this Broncos offense haven't shown me that they can pass at an elite level consistently when it matters most. And that's what you're going to need to do, because I think the biggest part that will decide this game is actually the Broncos defense versus the Bills offense, that side of the ball, which we will get to in a second. But you do need to keep pace with Josh Allen, because however good your defense is, Bills are still going to score. They're still going to score. And I don't think Bo Nix and this team are quite there yet to keep pace when it matters most. You got to have it. And this is going back to the thing where it's like you just need a bucket. You need a play made. I don't think the Broncos have that guy on the roster. I think maybe Mims could become that eventually. You get the ball to him in space and he makes a move. I think Courtland is on the edge of that, but ultimately as a route runner, It's 3rd and 7, man coverage. We need you to win. I don't trust him to do it that much and that high stakes. So I do think the Denver loses this game because they're just not going to be – they don't have Josh Allen on their side. And Bo Nix, he's had a good season, but he's not Josh Allen, and I do think that will decide the game.
Love me some Bo, but when push comes to shove, yeah, I'm going to side with Josh Allen. There's only one quarterback who can beat Josh Allen in the playoffs, and we'll preview that. And would it be the conference championship episode?
Yes.
We'll get
we will.
But now talking Bills offense, obviously they're going to get theirs. However, the Broncos aren't going to make things easy on them. I think that Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper are going to go toe-to-toe with Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. Those are both matchups where both sides are going to have some favorable reps. I look to the interior for a pass rush presence. John Franklin Myers, who is a player I've thought was underrated for quite a long time, and first team, second team, all-pro interior Zach Allen, second team because Chris Jones and who is the other first teamer?
Hayward.
Yeah, Hayward. Zach Allen having a career season. What's so scary about Josh Allen is that he is the best pressure mitigator in the NFL. He will throw you off of him in the pocket. He'll make you miss. He'll punish you with his legs. He'll punish you as a play extender. However, just because he's really good at avoiding the pass rush doesn't mean that the pass rush makes him statistically better. If he's running for his life every play, it's going to be higher variance. And higher variance is good for the underdog, the Broncos in this case.
Yeah, I agree. I like pointing out Zach Allen because if there is a weakness in this Bills offensive line, it's the interior. And I don't know if there's an interior defensive lineman in the NFL hotter right now on a better streak than Zach Allen. 2 weeks ago, he had 4 sacks against the Bengals. That was the last time he played. He played against the Chiefs, but that game wasn't real. So Zach Allen's on a heater right now. And if he can get to Josh Allen consistently up the middle, and the biggest part about this game, if they want to bring down Allen, they need to close the B gap. All right. Bonito and Cooper need to have some gap stability. They need to have some gap discipline in the pass game, which is weird. But Allen will take off through that B gap. So Bonito and Cooper, I believe, I've seen a couple of videos of them talking about this. They know how important it is. We need to close that B gap. Bonito's not going to try to do the thing to beat him around, to beat Dawkins around the edge. Because if you do, Allen's going to escape. He knows that. They're going to try to take it up front and keep Allen inside the pocket where Zach Allen can come up and feed on him. Now, when it comes to the secondary and how the Bills like to win in the passing game, I actually think this Broncos defense is very well equipped to deal with what Josh Allen and Joe Brady and this Bills offense like to do. And I think that's why this game's so interesting to me, because what the Bills have really run so much of, what they've made their name with, what they've really gotten their points with is the dirty bunch formation, where it's basically you motion a guy into a bunch closer to 2 other guys. It becomes a bunch formation. And that way, all of this rise in match coverage quarters looks that we've seen so heavily this season, those guys, it's a rule-based defensive system. They don't know who they're covering. So the Bills guys are just having guys run free every other play because the defenders can't make these split-second decisions to decide who they're covering correctly every time. But when you go up against a Broncos team that loves man coverage and loves man blitzes, you can't run a lot of these more intermediate to deep routes, developing concepts, because Allen will be under pressure. And when you do, this man coverage defense, they know who their man is. Maybe they'll switch occasionally, but they know who their man is. They're going to stay disciplined. This is one of the best man coverage teams in football. And it's going to be really hard to do your signature thing using the dirty bunch to beat this team that is so good at man coverage. When you've got Surtain and Moss and McMillan, I just don't see a favorable matchup for the Bills receivers at all. I just find it hard to see how they're going to move the ball through the air. And through the ground, it's a whole nother thing, right? They're elite at running the ball, but the Broncos are elite at stopping the run. So this is probably the best matchup the Broncos could have got. They match up incredibly well, So also Josh Allen taking the least sacks of any team this year at 14. The Broncos have sacked the quarterback the most times out of any team this season at 63. So it's just a fascinating matchup. The Broncos are kind of built to beat this Bills team, but I still am going to take the Bills.
If the Broncos can properly execute that defensive game plan where they're keeping Josh Allen in the pocket, they're forcing the Bills out of what they're comfortable with, getting a lot of cleaner looks that you can run good man coverage against. I think that is going to make life harder on Buffalo, especially because if they can't go to their traditional bunch stuff, Keon Coleman is just eliminated, right? Like he's not making a catch against Pat Surtain. That's why I have Riley Moss on Mac Hollins as one of my top matchups to watch, because in that Bengals game, Riley Moss was getting picked on. And I think that was way overplayed because that was a primetime game. It was a lot of people's first real exposure to Riley Moss. And it was his first game back from injury. That's not fair going against T. Higgins. Now he's had some time to healthy up. I think he's got the advantage over Mac Hollins. And I think that the Bills aren't just going to be able to pass the Broncos to death like they've been able to do against a lot of other teams. However, even if that game plan is executed to perfection, Denver still has to do one thing. They've got to tackle. They've got to tackle Josh Allen. They can't let Josh Allen be making guys miss and running through linebackers. They've got to tackle James Cook, who's one of the shiftiest running backs in the NFL. He's been excellent in terms of yards over expected per attempt. He knows how to generate the extra yardage that gets you first downs, that gets you touchdowns. And they're going to get the ball out quick to Khalil Shakir. They got to tackle him as well.
Yeah. And that's been an issue with these Broncos linebackers, namely, is tackling this season. So if Allen gets in space, if James Cook gets in space, that is where Buffalo is going to attack, and that's where they have a real advantage. So I look to see James Cook getting a lot of screens. He's going to get a lot of 2-yard targets. They're going to try to match him up against Strnad on the Broncos side and let him go to work, right? But Buffalo, what they really love to do, they love – throw up.
16.3% missed tackle rate for Justin Strnad on the season.
Yeah, it's not all that good, and it's really gotten worse over the season. So, that is a concern. But the Bills' run game, it'll be fascinating to see which unit comes out on top. The Bills' run offense versus the Broncos' run defense, because really that run game has been the foundation for Buffalo this season. Obviously, we see the flashy pass plays, and that's what they love to do. But it's all set up by James Cook getting 7 yards on first down, giving Josh Allen a 2nd and 3 or 2nd and 2 free down, basically, to just go ham and make something happen with his legs or his arm. So if the Broncos on first down are limiting James Cook to 2 yards, to 3 yards, to a loss of a yard occasionally, if Zach Allen's getting in there and muddying it up, if Benito and Cooper are setting the edge well, Buffalo could be thrown out of a rhythm. And when Buffalo has been thrown out of rhythm, which is rarely this season, that is where the real issues have been. That's how they lost to Houston. Josh Allen had to throw guys open. He made some mistakes. This Broncos defense will capitalize on mistakes. So if they can throw them out of rhythm, I think that's the path to victory for defense. Obviously, all the schemes stuff and to make that matters, but really the goal is to just throw Josh Allen out of rhythm, throw Joe Brady's offense out of rhythm, and make every yard hard.
My last word on this game. I think a lot of people think of the Broncos as this, well-coached, basically playoff pretender because they don't have a lot of star power outside of Pat Surtain. However, the Bills kind of don't have a ton of star talent outside of Josh Allen either, in my opinion. One way that they might be able to get some, we talked about regular season Lamar, playoff Von Miller. Von Miller is better and better down the stretch. He's got a knack for turning it on at the right time. Potentially an X factor.
Oh, yeah. And against his old team, I think he's going to go hard. Some of the stuff he's been posting on Instagram is really funny. It's like the crying guy holding the gun against the Broncos. It's just like, he's a true Bronco at heart, but he's going to give his all this Sunday. He's not going to take it easy on us.
That's awesome. All things considered, I don't think that this game is a blowout despite the 8.5-point spread.
Yeah, I'd take Bills money line, but I'd take Broncos to cover the spread.
It's all come full circle for the Packers and Eagles. Their season started with a messy showdown in Brazil. 11 wins later for the Packers, 13 more later for Philadelphia. That's where it comes back to. The city of brotherly love. Packers 5.5-point underdogs, and they are beat up to hell right now. Christian Watson out. Jair Alexander out, both long-term injuries as well. Zane Anderson, a role player, stepped up in the safety room, out. And Evan Williams, his running mate, who's been a huge pleasant surprise, questionable. Brenton Cox, he's been a huge part in generating some pass rush down the stretch for Green Bay. Questionable. TJ Slayton, their spacing nose tackle. Questionable. Quay Walker, questionable. Jordan Love, crucially, is good to go. So is Jalen Hurts. He's back from concussion protocol. There's been a lot of talk about how Hurts is going to look coming back from this. I don't know how much it matters because I think that Philly is going to absolutely dominate the trenches. To be perfectly honest with you, if the Eagles don't get too cute and they don't let Jalen Hurts make mistakes, they just hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley, I think he's going to have one hell of a day. This is going to be a true test of Edgerrin Cooper's mettle, who's been huge for the Packers with Quay Walker, being Quay Walker, making splash plays, being out of position, missing tackles at times, and Isaiah McDuffie being a special teams caliber linebacker. I don't ultimately think it's going to be enough, especially if TJ Slayton doesn't go. Kenny Clark needs to step up, and he needs to go throwback to 2018 mode and start two-gapping. Anything that the Packers can do to hold their own in the trenches is going to be huge in this one.
Yeah, see, I think this is the first game that I think we see a little bit differently because I think that the Packers, I kind of like how they match up in the trenches. Now, I know I'm telling you about your own team, so obviously forgive me if I'm wrong about any of this, but I kind of like this Packers matchup because I think this is one of the few teams in the league who play in a way that kind of lessens some of Philadelphia's strengths. Just because the Packers, they don't have a elite guy on that line, right? I don't think any of us would call Gary elite right now. I don't think we've seen a lot of big plays from anybody, but they have a lot of dudes. And being them not healthy is an issue. And if they can't go, that severely impacts it for me. But if all of them can go, if Cox and Slayton can go, they've just got a lot of guys. You don't have to rely on one guy beating a Philly offensive lineman consistently, which is a thing that a lot of defenses do. We have a really good player. Our defense is built around you're going to win a lot, and that's how we're going to win. But you can't do that against Lane Johnson. You can't do that against Jordan Mailata. You can't do that against Landon Dickerson. So because the Packers have all of these guys, they're not expecting any singular guy to win. They're not going to have to change their game plan too much. We're just going to throw 5 guys out there. I mean, they've got what? They've got 6 guys that I think can really make not only a difference in the run game, but in the pass rushing. Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness has kind of stepped it up towards the latter half of the season, doing better in the pass rush, better in the run game. Kenny Clark, not his old self, but still good. Brenton Cox Jr., as he said, been a real revelation this season. Devontae Wyatt, he's been all right. Kingsley and Igbare has been all right. They all have 9% plus pressure rates, all have decent stop numbers, right? So all of these guys combine to make, in my opinion, a defense that will make it harder for Philly to just get those consistent, easy yards in whatever way they want. Philly, if they want to win, they need to figure out a specific way to beat this Packers team, hone in on that, and run that into the ground. They've loved the multivariate approach. They're going to need to hone in for this game to beat a deceptively deep Packers defensive line.
I think we see it adjacently, albeit in a slightly different way. My big concern is that those players going up against, say, the 18th to 14th best offensive line in the NFL, you have an advantage because you can keep guys fresh, not just as pass rushers, but in run defense. You can be multiple with the fronts that you're trotting out there. You're showing offensive linemen a variety of different pass rush styles. My concern is that against the Eagles' offensive line that essentially doesn't have a weak link, the individual pass rushing impacts might virtually be non-starters. Like, you just don't have a guy that can win at a high enough clip to make an impact, which is why I think this needs to be Jeff Hafley's best defensive play calling performance of the year. When he has dialed up the blitz, which is what he was known for, it's what Packers fans were excited to see, it's been fireworks. He just does it at one of the lowest rates in the league. I think that if Green Bay stifles Philly's offense in any meaningful way, like I think if we hold them to less than 24, which would, in my opinion, be a best case scenario, it's because Hafley trotted out a new game plan and he brought the heat for the first time this season, essentially. And it was something that the Eagles didn't have film on. because it's not just the run game. I think that Saquon Barkley could have an excellent day. I think that they're going to be able to displace the Packers in the front seven. They have an advantage in the passing attack as well, because I mentioned why I'm not super optimistic for the Packers pass rush. Without Jair Alexander, I think the Packers defensive backfield, well, I shouldn't say their defensive backfield. I think that their cornerback room is fine, but Devontae Smith is excellent. Dallas Goedert has made an impact in his return from injury, and A.J. Brown, is it ridiculous that I think he might be the best receiver in the NFL?
Well, yes, but I don't think it's ridiculous to say he's top 3.
I don't. Okay, who's 3? So you got Jefferson, you got Chase. I think he's easily 3. I think he's 3 at worst.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. Look, this is not important, but I'm trying to. Surely there's another guy, right? I mean, I don't think I'm in Rob. Listen, I'm a big A.J. Brown believer, but I think 3. Yeah, I'm fine with putting him 3. I just wouldn't put him over Jefferson or Chase.
That's fair.
But it is closer. It is closer than the public views it, I think.
His efficiency numbers, like, just a side note, I was checking some of this stuff out. His efficiency numbers are, like, absolutely obscene. He averages, like, 3.95 yards per route run against man coverage, and the next highest is, like, Puka Nacua at, like, 3.25.
Did you see that?
The next guy.
Did you see that fucking catch? The one-hander? It didn't count against, I think it was, like, New York.
I don't know that I did see that one, no.
But he goes up. He didn't count. He got a foot in, actually. But this ball is way overthrown by Jalen Hurts. He just leaps 18 feet in the air, gets one hand on it, immediately gets possession, and hauls it in, and gets a foot down, all while there's a cornerback smothering him. One of the most impressive feats I've ever seen in a football field, and it didn't count. I almost think the ref should have just counted it because of the rule of cool, right? But it obviously didn't count. But he's just a freak, and that's another concern I have. How are you going to stop him?
This discussion kind of like came back to being relevant to the game in a roundabout way when you talked about how Jalen Hurts overthrew a pass. That's what's so special in particular about A.J. Brown is he's a safety blanket in a way that usually an elite slot receiver like an Amon-Ra is or a George Kittle is, except he's a safety blanket that's 30 yards downfield. The Philly offense that's full of playmakers. This is just a loaded roster. Still functions so much differently when A.J. Brown is out there. It's a new level of comfort for Jalen Hurts. And I think if the Packers win, we need a bad Jalen Hurts game. I just don't know how we're going to force it. That's why kind of my bottom line on this game, it's the Eagles' game to lose. I don't think the Packers are bad, but I think that's how good Philadelphia is.
I think it's the Eagles' game to lose. I agree. I think they're going to try, and I think you hit it on the head. You need a Jalen Hurts bad game. And when you look at what Jalen Hurts has put up in the playoffs, it's insane that he's not getting the Lamar treatment. Just because he went to a Super Bowl, he got carried by one of the greatest rosters we've seen in the last 10 years to a Super Bowl. He's never really put up a really good playoff game, except for the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, weirdly enough. That was a good game. But I actually think that is what keeps the Packers close in this game. Because we haven't talked about their offense, but I have some concerns there. But I think if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would really like the Xavier McKinney over 0.5 interceptions this weekend. Because I think Jalen Hurts, it comes full circle to what you said about Jeff Hafley. He needs to blitz. He needs to blitz, and I believe in him, and I like him. I think he's going to tell these guys the right thing to do. I think he's going to roll out a nice game plan. I think he's going to get Hurts a little bit more uncomfortable. And when Hurts is uncomfortable, he makes mistakes. He throws the ball awkwardly. And who is better at taking advantage of an underthrown or overthrown ball? It's nobody's better than Xavier McKinney. He's going to go out there and I think he's going to take one. I really do. I think he's going to give Philly a tough time. I think he's going to give Hurts a tough time. I think he's going to give the Packers an extra chance to get close in this game. That's why I am predicting it to be pretty close.
Let's see if I can pull this phrase off. This is probably going to take me multiple takes. By the way, we're keeping this segment, the episode, absolutely my lead up into this phrase. We've been talking a lot about over-unders. We've been talking a lot about coming full circle. I don't know if you remember Reed Blankenship's kind of undercut interception in that Brazil game. I would take the over on Reed Blankenship picks because I can just visualize Jordan Love under interior pressure, off the back foot, and he undercuts another one. And that underlies my deeper concerns, which is even if things get messy for Philly, which we've seen it, it's possible. They are not the most clean, cohesive offense necessarily. And the Green Bay defense is at its best when it can generate takeaways. But I think that there are going to be some giveaways on the Packers' end as well, primarily because I don't think that they're going to be able to fall back on the run game. You talked about how deep the Packers' defensive line group is, where they have 6 or 7 guys who are replacement level starters at worst. Well, it feels like Philly has 6 guys who are quality starters at worst. When Green Bay can't fall back on Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love has to press a little bit. Kind of feels like he pulls it together toward the end of games, but I don't know. He's put us behind the 8 ball early quite often. And with Philly's secondary, it's also extremely talented, squeezing the routes with Christian Watson out. I don't have a ton of faith in our offense to score points early.
Yeah, and that is what worries me. Now, my prediction for this game is Philly 20, Green Bay 17. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about how I see this game. I believe in Green Bay's defense. I believe that they're going to have a good game. I think they're going to mitigate Philly as well as we've seen any defense do, which is surprising when you consider how much we've talked some shit about Green Bay's defense. I just believe in the matchups here. I'm out on the Packers offense against this specific defense. Fangio and what he loves to do, it's the cover 6 match, sometimes not. It's the cover 6. And how do you beat cover 6? You stay underneath. You stay patient. The death by 1,000 cuts approach, as it's commonly called. And I like Jordan Love a lot, but that is just not what he does. It's just not. And the run game, that's my matchup to watch because I don't think Love's going to do enough underneath. So I think you're going to need to be able to have a consistent run game. And with how much they run out of shotgun, I can just vividly see Jalen Carter and Milton Williams getting into the backfield 3-4 times in the first half for losses of yards when they slip by Josh Myers. And LaFleur goes away from the run game. Love has to throw more underneath. He forces a couple bad ones, and Philly just wins this game with their defense. So that is why I think Philly wins, not because of their offense, but because of their defense. And because I don't think Jordan Love is going to be patient enough to win this game for him.
You talked about how you have to attack the Eagles underneath, and I think that that's a great philosophy. Like you mentioned, I just don't have a lot of faith in us to pull it off because you look at who the Packers want to go to in the underneath game. Tucker Kraft is my number one. Zach Bond has been absolutely lights out. Badger product, shout out. But I think he's about to give a Wisconsin team some serious hell in coverage. You want to go to Jaden Reed? Well, he's going to be matched up with Cooper DeJean, who's been fantastic this season. Is he a rookie? Sure, but an extremely experienced player out of Iowa. I think he plays beyond his years. That's why my matchup to watch is Dontavian Wicks versus his own pair of hands. I mean, no, but you get the idea. This is not a Green Bay offense, and especially receiving room, that's going to beat you with the paper cuts. They want to beat you with the explosives, and Philly does not allow many of those through the air.
Yeah, and the one guy that maybe you feel the best about getting that explosive, getting that big play, it's Christian Watson, and he's not playing. So it's a bad look for Green Bay. But you know what? Matt LaFleur can really get he's already on my good side. He can get very far on my good side if he calls the game, despite all of these things that we've talked about going against him. He calls a great game. If Green Bay wins this game, I think it's due to LaFleur and Hafley coaching the games of their lives.
Do the Eagles have a player on defense who is not a quality starter or a defensive starter? Obviously. Do they have a single player out there that you're not happy with? I mean, my mind goes into Dean, and Nakobe Dean's been excellent.
I'm happy with Dean. On defense, so technically they're starting Nolan Smith.
I was going to say Nolan Smith. I was looking for his name. I was going to say the edge rusher out of Georgia.
Yeah, right. Like, some days I'm not happy with Nolan Smith, but the highs are there. And you've also got Bryce Huff. If Nolan Smith isn't working, you just go to him and he'll do really well. So I'm happy with that. If you get a bad day from Darius Slay or CJ Gardner-Johnson, that's probably the hole, right?
That's
That's the
true.
guy that you're not happy with, because it feels like on any given day, C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay, one of them can come out and give a stinker. So if I had to pick one then, but realistically, most of the time they're given quality performances. Philly's defense is just built so well, and they're coached so well by Fangio. They're an impenetrable wall. And that's why it'd be so impressive if LaFleur could find a way to consistently get yards and points.
They've got Milton Williams hanging out in there. He's just a chill guy, causing havoc as like this team's sixth best defensive lineman somehow.
Yeah, I mean he looks like he's going 50% of Jordan Davis's speed. Well, no, he looks like he's putting 50% of Jordan Davis's effort in while going like 3 times his speed.
This defense is absolutely wild. It's going to be a tough day for the Packers. There's a path to victory, but I have the Eagles 31-17. Hey, if we lose, I'll be correct and I'll be happy. If we win, I'll be wrong, but I'll be happier.
Well, I'm betting on the Packers to keep it close, and I am picking them to cover the spread. It's 4.5, right? So I picked them to cover the spread. Hopefully, I'm right for your sake. But I believe I'll probably be let down.
It's actually 5.5, so you have a little bit more wiggle room.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I picked the Packers to cover the spread.
I respect it. All right, to be perfectly honest with you, I think this next game is the least predictable of the bunch. It's the 12-5 Commanders headed to take on the. Are they 10-7? Are my notes correct? Yeah,
10-7.
South, isn't it?
I didn't even need to know. You didn't even need to say the team names before I knew who you were talking about.
Side note: these teams are just so frustrating to pick every week because you have no idea whether you're going to get the good or bad version, and that's how I feel exactly like that picking this game.
So actually, side note, sorry, I have stats on that. I sat down this week and I went through and I see what is my record in picking these teams. So playoff teams, if I picked your team wrong, to Pittsburgh fans, if I might have picked your team wrong because I went 8-9 picking Pittsburgh this year. So
interesting.
There's a better chance.
Strong teams.
Yeah, there's a better chance than not that I got yours wrong, right? But for Tampa and Washington, I'm curious. I was 11-6 picking Washington, and I was 11-6 picking Tampa. Those are on the below the 50th percentile for my picks. So these teams have been really hard to pick this season. They're just so high variance.
It's kind of funny. I think one of my worst teams on the season is actually the Packers. I pulled it together a little bit, but I still picked the Seahawks to beat them. Sue me for this. I picked them to beat the Bears last week, but I can't wait to do the math myself. It's going to be really interesting to take a look at.
Weirdly enough, one of the team that I was tied with second best at was the Giants, and I told you this. I went 14-3 picking the Giants because I never picked the Giants to win once. They went 3-14, and I picked them to go 0-17, and that was one of my most accurate teams behind the Lions and the Bills.
You didn't even check the matchups, not like the player-to-player matchups. You didn't check who they were playing that week.
No, I had no notes. I just put pencil down Giants loss. Talk about how shit Daniel Jones and Tommy DeVito are. Mention the draft, and that was it.
Well, the week next year where they play Southern Miss University, they're really going to prove you wrong. You better check the matchup for that one.
I still might pick Southern Miss.
Upset alert. Tampa Bay favored by a field goal at home. The Bucs are getting Antoine Winfield and K-Dot back, but the Commies, they're bringing back Marshawn Lattimore. Honestly, I think this matchup is decided by the QBs. Both these guys could go hot or cold at any time, particularly Baker Mayfield. His highs are 45 points per game highs. His lows are he's throwing the ball to the defense. He's making mistakes and this is what's so crucial to me about Baker and why I'm not in love with him as a franchise quarterback. Some QBs make mistakes in predictable spots, like the Geno Smiths of the world. Like they're under pressure, they're in a gotta-have-it game, and they're going to put the ball up. I kind of feel like Baker makes mistakes in doesn't gotta-have-it situations. Like, you could have thrown that out of bounds, or you just missed the underneath linebacker. Kind of uncharacteristic stuff against bad teams. And this is a Commanders defense that's very gettable. It could drop anywhere from 45 to 21 on them. I don't know.
I actually have a stat about that in my notes. Baker has thrown 80% of his turnovers, well, 80% of his interceptions have come when he's not under pressure and not being blitzed.
That's absolutely insane.
By far the
That's
highest in the league.
one thing I really like to look at when I'm picking these games is there a distinct difference in EPA under pressure versus kept clean? And that's done some great things for me. Like the Broncos are a good example of that. Early in the season, Bo Nix was a fantastic clean pocket passer, not so much under pressure. Baker, you just have no idea what you're going to get any given week. And that's why I think this one is anyone's game, even though I think that the Bucs have the objectively more talented roster.
Yeah, I liked what you said about this game is going to come down to quarterbacks, and I really think it does. And it's not just going to come down to Baker, though it really will. How high variance is he going to be? But we'll talk about the run games in a second because I think those are fascinating. But that's the biggest thing for me. My matchup to watch today is actually going to be Jaden Daniels versus the terrible, no good history of rookies in the playoffs. Can he overcome it? Because he's been a freak this year, and especially over the past 6 weeks, Cliff Kingsbury has kind of just thrown away okay, this is an intro, you're still a rookie. He's just like, no, we're going to put everything on your shoulders, and you got to do it for us all. And he's delivered. But rookies almost never deliver in the playoffs, even if they look like Jaden Daniels has this year. So if he can keep playing at this top 10, top 7 level, then I think the Commanders have a really good chance to win. But if he falls victim to that rookie bug, it's a big game, it's too much pressure for me, it could be a rough day for Jaden Daniels stands, and it could be a rough day for Commanders fans.
I think there's a blueprint on how you slow down Jaden Daniels and how you make him a little bit uncomfortable. You got to get after him, but you have to constrict the pocket and not give him opportunities to be an escape artist. We saw the Eagles do this. We saw the Steelers do this, and the Steelers still gave up, I think, 27 points in that game where they barely eked out the win. However, those are two teams that have fantastic pass rushes and fantastic depth all along the defensive line. Do the Bucs have that? Kind of. And that just feels like a factor that increases the variance. I think that Washington's offensive line is very beatable. But do we see the Bucs show up in full? I think that we see Vita Vea eating space. Maybe a good performance from Kalijah Kancey. I'm just not entirely sure. And then even if everything does go according to plan for Tampa Bay, Jaden Daniels is still a player who can break a sack and then punish you out of structure. One of my matchups to watch here is Terry McLaurin versus Zion McCollum. I truly think that this is going to be an enormous factor because McCollum is obviously a player who can run with McLaurin vertical. And I don't have a ton of faith that the Commanders are going to have a really strong run game. They're going to need to generate some explosives. I don't think that they have difference-making pass catchers outside of Terry McLaurin. I don't think Terry's ever been to the playoffs before, if I had to guess. Washington never made it previously, right?
Yeah, no, yeah? They remember that. Yeah, no, because they took Tom Brady to damn near overtime with Taylor Heineke.
Oh, I remember that. Okay,
that was the one Washington appearance. That was the closest game Tampa Bay had in the postseason. The Taylor Heineke-led Washington Commanders.
Taylor Heineke, franchise quarterback. Terry McLaurin's going to want it. He's going to be out there competing for a Super Bowl. This is his Super Bowl. Win a playoff game.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to be watching. It feels like it's not going to be a blowout, I don't think. But it feels like it could be anywhere from a true shootout, like we saw against the Falcons in that Commanders game, like we've seen from the Buccaneers during that losing stretch where they went toe-to-toe with a bunch of good teams. Or we could see a mistake-filled affair where neither team has a particularly strong run game and the quarterbacks are missing throws and turning the ball over, and the pass rush emerges victorious. That's why one of my factors to watch is Bobby Wagner versus Bucky Irving. The guy who never misses a tackle versus the running back who specializes in generating tackles. Oh my God. The running back who specializes in generating missed tackles. I'm grasping at straws, looking for any factor that isn't just which quarterback is hot. And I really think a team that can play downhill a little bit, that can consistently attack the second level with their run game, they're going to be ahead of the chains, and they are going to have an advantage, especially in the red zone.
Yeah, the run games are really important to both of these teams. They're both top five rushing offenses, right? But the difference between their is going to come on the defense, right? Washington allows the third most rushing yards per game, while Tampa allows the fourth least. So if that trend continues, this should be a game for Tampa to win. But with Jonathan Allen back, he hasn't looked like himself. But if he can really take that jump to look like pre-injury Jonathan Allen, if Ron Payne can put some good reps on tape, if Fedarian Mathis, if Johnny Newton can go out there and occasionally put together a good sequence or so, then maybe we force a Baker mistake on occasion. But you know what? You wanted a swing factor, and I think I've got a slight swing factor here because I think this is a really interesting clash of two philosophies. You've got the Cliff Kingsbury philosophy from college, right? We're going to run a really fast-paced offense. We're going to get to the line quick. We're going to snap. We're going to go, 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 go. Versus you've got the Liam Cohen Tampa Bay philosophy, which Liam Cohen also came from the college game, but he just adjusted to the NFL way of going, where Tampa, they love to run that clock out. They love to waste time, give their opponents as little possessions as possible, chances to score. We're going to run the clock out. We're going to run the football. And whenever Washington has gone up against a team like that, that loves to burn the clock, like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh do, they've struggled because they don't get as many chances to score because the time of possession for Tampa is just going to be higher. And if you're not holding the ball for longer, that means you're just choosing to lose the time of possession battle. And you're not going to get as many possessions as you normally do, which means the margin for error is a lot smaller. And in this Washington high variance offense, you definitely don't want a small margin for error, especially in a big game like this. So I think that could be a swing factor. If Washington can't come down to Tampa Bay's level, if they can't slow it down and Tampa Bay's getting whatever they want, they're running the clock down to 5, 4, 3 seconds every play, then maybe Washington just gets outworked. Their defense is too tired to keep up in the end, and Tampa Bay wins it.
Victor, I feel like you just gave me a revelation. I mean, you've kind of put what I'm mentally thinking, like why I side with Tampa Bay, into words here. Because I think that the Buccaneers can win a boat race. They can drop 6 touchdowns on you, but they don't have to. They can go slow. In good matchups, they can run the football. Whereas the Commanders, they have to go fast. They have to beat you vertical. Maybe against really poor defensive lines, they can get downhill. Like you mentioned, this is a team that fundamentally wants to run the football, but I'm not going to side with the team with the mediocre offensive line matching up against Vita Vea. And you also took my closing notes out of my mouth as well. Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne haven't been themselves. We need the veterans to step up if the Commanders are going to, I don't want to say keep this one close, because I think there are alleys for Jaden Daniels to kind of be Superman, to make plays out of structure and keep this one close. But if they want to win, they need to at least hold their own in the trenches. Ultimately, I've got Buccaneers 31-24.
I've got Bucks 30-27 because I believe in Daniels. I think he's going to overcome the rookie curse. I think it's going to be such a great game. And last note on this game, we talk about matchups to watch a lot. But this is going to be the first ever Balls Talk Sports official NFL Fight Night. In one corner of the ring, we got Bucks Hall of Famer Mike Evans. In the other corner of the ring, we got Commander's Corner Marshawn Lattimore going head-to-head in a matchup you don't want to miss. The fight of the century coming to you Sunday night from Raymond James Stadium. Don't miss it.
I can't wait, man. This is going to be awesome.
They've played, I think, 12 games against each other, and I remember at least 5 or 6 scuffles, at the very least, between them. And it's playoff football. The tensions are running high. The emotions are long. These guys are going to get scrappy at least once. At least.
It's almost on the level of Juwan Jennings versus any defensive back.
Definitely, it's not on the level of OBJ, but maybe it is on that OBJ versus Josh Norman level.
This is going to be, I can't wait. We don't just get a great football game, we get a great boxing match as well.
Yep.
Over under on punches thrown directly into face masks?
See, that's the thing, because if Mike throws one, then Marshawn's going to throw one. If Marshawn throws one, then Mike's going to throw one. So I feel like you got to put it at like 1.5, but I almost want to say 2.5 is the over.
I'd say 2.5. I think we're going to get a quick left-right, and neither one really lands actually hard, and then they get pulled apart by their teammates so they can do that let me at them thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not just getting the football predictions, folks. We're
You're getting
choreographing.
high quality fighting takes.
And finally, we've got a Monday night rematch. The 14-3 Vikings, who suddenly feel that much more vulnerable after their showing against Detroit, versus the 10-7 Rams, who are essentially on a winning streak. I know they technically went out on a losing note against the Seahawks, but come on, that was a moral victory, right? Keeping that game so close with frickin' Jimmy Garoppolo with a backup offensive line.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have that the Rams are 9-2 coming into the playoffs, and I didn't factor in that game. That wasn't a real game.
Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, and Pat Jones questionable. So 2 running backs and 2 Jones. You can make a little Venn diagram out of that. For the Rams, and I think this is huge for them, they're healthied up. Only Rob Havenstein is questionable. However, the Rams continually feel like a team where, oh, they're healthy now. We're going to see the good version of them every game, right? And instead, you see the good version maybe half the time. I don't entirely know what to make of this Rams offense, especially considering the history of this matchup. Week 8, Rams 30, Vikings 20. Vikings were red hot. I loved Minnesota to win that game. But the Rams knew how to get after what Brian Flores was doing as far as loading up the line and bringing in a ton of heat to generate free rushers. They got the ball out hot in that one. It was a big game back for Puka Nacua. It was a big game back from Cooper Kupp. Ball immediately into Stafford's hands and then out to the perimeter. That sparked a change in Brian Flores' defensive philosophy. He's been running more man coverage. He's still showing that simulated pressure look where it essentially overloads the offensive line protection schemes. So you're more likely to get free rushers out of it. And you also get deception by dropping back unsuspecting bodies into coverage. However, you're so much sounder on the back end where you're not just getting gashed by perimeter screens every other play. I kind of don't know if the Rams have another feather in their cap that they can go to. What do you think? Do you think that they figure it out again and they drop big numbers on an excellent Minnesota defense?
So that's a really good question because honestly, I could say that I know. I don't because we've seen this matchup before. It's so fascinating to me because the Rams were the first one to crack that Flores system. What they did, it was really simple. We're going to get the ball into the flat, into outside to the quick perimeter or deep perimeter, give Puka a chance on the outside, or we're going to get the ball to a guy and let him make a man miss, or we're just going to throw crossers at you the entire day. Because the weakness of the Flores quarter system when you're going to bring another guy is that it's a lot of players that are going to track with man until they deliver it to a player and to another player. But when everybody's delivering a player to everybody else, it just somebody gets free. So the Rams just did that all night, and it worked really well. So theoretically, they just do that again. They kill him again, but Flores is going to adjust to what he saw in that Rams game. So McVay, obviously, we know we've talked about it at length. Everybody has how much of an offensive genius is, and he gets credit for breaking that Flores defense first. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it again. Because of how Flores has adjusted. He's become more multivariate in his approach. Like you said, we're going to run more man. We're still going to run our quarters. We're still going to run our simulated pressure. But we can run a little bit more cover 2 as well. We can run some more cover 3. Not as much cover 3, but we can run some more of that. It's just so McVay's going to have to figure out another way. But that's why it's so hard for me to predict this game because I think it's going to come down to a chess match between 3 of 4, honestly. 4 of the best coordinators in the game, though Chris Shula is probably a level or 2 below Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, and Sean McVay. But these 3 and 4 guys are just going to be at war with each other, figuring out these tiny little nuances to win the game. So we can do our best to predict this. But when you've got guys, not only guys who are so talented and smart, but guys who have seen each other before in the season, it makes it all the harder to predict a game like this.
And the Rams, they don't have to be a high-flying offense. Like you mentioned, they can get the ball out hot, and they can let their run-after-catch playmakers like Puka do the work. However, they can also come out in tight splits, and they can run the ball with Kyren Williams. The Vikings have been exceptional at defending runs, especially if the offense they're playing isn't just coming at them with heavy personnel and a bunch of ass-kicking run blockers like the Lions did against them twice. When you're using guys like Cooper Kupp as maybe you're running motion insert where he becomes the lead blocker, kind of an unsuspecting matchup changer last second to try and get a free lead blocker on you. The Vikings have been able to shut that down. However, they're coming off a loss against Detroit, and they're going to be feeling it. I don't know if we see that same physicality from Minnesota that's made them such a fantastic light box run team. So if the Rams can control time of possession, maybe they don't need to score a whole bunch of touchdowns. Maybe they kick some field goals. Maybe they generate a couple mistakes from Sam Darnold, and I'll let you go from there because Sam Darnold's performance, we know how great he's been all season. Not the story against Detroit last week, and now the lights are on. Now it's the playoffs. Which version do we get, and how confident are you?
It's a really tough situation because when you look at what Aaron Glenn and the Lions did last week to really stifle Sam Darnold for the first time not the first time, but really make him look vulnerable. To quote Sam Darnold himself, he was seeing ghosts last game, right? It looked like that game against the Patriots, man. And I'll tell you what they did. They just ran cover zero like most of the game, and it worked. Let's just blitz everybody we have at Sam Darnold, and I don't know, let's see what happens. Aaron Glenn did that, and it worked. Darnold was under pressure all the time. He missed so many throws, most of them high, by the way. I guarantee that's something Chris Shula is going to key on in, and he's going to, okay, how can we take advantage of these Darnold missing these high throws? Now, a big part of that, though, why that game plan worked so well was because of the outstanding performance from Amik Robertson from the Lions. He put the locks on Justin Jefferson as well as I've seen any NFL corner do. I don't think the Rams have a guy like that. So now you're in a kind of catch-22 if you're Los Angeles. Well, if we go zero, we blitz everybody. There is no world in which I trust our secondary to go man coverage with no help against Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson. But then if we drop 7 into coverage, by the way, like the Rams love to do, they hardly ever blitz. They blitz a decent amount, but they hardly run cover zero. They love to just let their guys get at it. They're elite. They're Verse, Fisk, Turner, Young, go with the quarterback. But if you drop those guys in coverage, you're just letting Sam Darnold play how he likes to play. So it's kind of catch-22 here. It's a decision for Chris Shula that he's going to have to make, and I don't like either option because either way, you're leaving it open. But you saw Sam Darnold's vulnerable side. I got to think they're going to try blitzing him at least a few times early in this game just to see what they've got and see if that secondary can hold up.
So we don't get to preview him this week. This is another tangent, by the way. I specialize in tangents. But I kind of love the Lions' plot armor, which is saying something as a Packers fan. It's like, oh, the entire defense is going to go down? We're just going to have frickin' Amik Robertson have an X-Factor type of performance against Justin Jefferson and get him so uncomfortable that he drops multiple passes. I don't think the Rams have that. You're right.
Yeah, but if the Vikings win this game and the Packers and the Buccaneers take care of business, we're going to get Vikes-Lions for the third time this season.
I would be so here for that. I might
and by the way,
they win this game because I think this is a real trap game for Minnesota, especially because they're beat up after playing Detroit.
Oh, yeah, because I feel like there's two ways they can come out. They can come out flat after beating Detroit because they're focusing on them in the divisional, or they can come out on fire like you just slapped their mother because they just lost the NFC North to the Lions. They got swept by them, and they want to go out and kill somebody before they play Detroit again. So I think if they come out on fire, they come out with the mentality that we are going to take this and you are not going to stop us. I find a hard time picking the Rams. But if they come out flat, I think it'll be an even game. I did pick the Vikings to win and cover because I just don't think this Rams defense has the tools to do what the Lions did, and I don't think they have the tools to stop these elite Vikings weapons. And I don't think we've seen the consistency from the Rams offense, and I think Flores is going to be able to exploit that. So I like the Vikings to win and cover, but it is a serious concern to me that they might just come out flat.
Even though I think this is a bit of a trap game for Minnesota, I've got them winning and covering as well. I have this one 28-21. And that's because although we're concerned about Sam Darnold having a rough day, potentially turning the ball over, inaccurate passes, Matthew Stafford hasn't been infallible either, especially under pressure. And I think that this is a beatable Rams offensive line against the front seven that really, really knows how to overload protection rules, generate free rushers, and get quarterbacks uncomfortable, especially ones that aren't excellent at buying extra time. What version of Matthew Stafford do we get? Do we get playoff Matthew Stafford? Do we get Super Bowl run Matthew Stafford? Or do we get the version that doesn't look as mobile, doesn't look quite as comfortable in the pocket, isn't always on the same page as his receivers on some of these deeper passing concepts? Because the Vikings offense, they are going to get theirs. They're going to put up points in this one. I don't think it can be all screens and run game for the Rams. If Matthew Stafford has to drop back out of the gun, he has to be maneuverable in the pocket, and he has to pass 30, 35 times and avoid making mistakes. I don't know if I'm 100% comfortable, even though he is a veteran. I think he's going to take his losses.
I agree, and I'll take it one step further. Do we get playoff Cooper Kupp? Do we get Super Bowl Cooper Kupp? Because he hasn't been that guy over the stretch. They need him. They need him. But like you said, Stafford, he's made a few mistakes this season that kind of just went, in some cases, slipped through the defense's fingers. A lot of times, he's throwing balls that should be picked but aren't. They're a couple inches away. If the zone is a little bit tighter, if the discipline's better, that one's going the other way. The zone will be tighter in Minnesota, in Arizona this weekend. The zone will be good. The players are disciplined. They're not going to drop the football. Stafford's got to play perfect. Kupp's got to have a big game. And Nakua's got to be an X. A true X.
Do you feel like this is a better than average wild card weekend? Like all of these games should truly be really competitive?
I do, because I really thought that this was kind of be, average. I think there's going to be a couple of blowouts and maybe some close games. But after digging into these matchups, if there's more than 2 blowouts, I mean, I'd be shocked if any of these games, except for Baltimore-Pittsburgh, were a really big blowout. But I'd be genuinely surprised if more than 2 of these games ended up being like a 2-possession win. We know the winner from the third quarter.
So we've got all these super close, hotly contested games, which is why an hour and a half of football content later, we picked all chalk and picked all the same winners, right?
We have picked all the same winners. Though I can tell you, I was legitimately inches away from picking Green Bay. I really was. I was so close to picking Green Bay, and I was also really close to picking Washington, but I just couldn't do it.
Well, that gives me some extra hope. The one that was toughest for me was Washington-Tampa Bay, but after I reviewed the matchups, I did feel a little bit more comfortable with Tampa Bay. In fact, actually, maybe I'll go back on that and say the one that was toughest for me was Vikings-Rams, because it feels to me like maybe the Rams have an extra gear that they're kind of saving for the playoffs. Maybe there's a reason that Sean McVay wanted to rest all his starters. I don't know. I get serious trap game vibes from that one, and I still don't feel like I have a 100% handle on how legit the Vikings are, even though they're 14-3. I'm super excited to see the results of this weekend. I can't wait for next week's show, but this is a really great slate of playoff teams, all things considered. I think the right teams made it. I'm glad that we don't have the Bengals or especially the Dolphins. The Bengals would be fun, but I love our playoff field this year.
Yeah, because also the Broncos are a more complete team than the Bengals. I think I would be picking the Bills by 2 touchdowns if it was Bills-Bengals, right? I'm glad Tampa got in over Atlanta. This is a really good slate. And one more thing about Vikings-Rams that I forgot to mention that I really did want to. The thing that could also decide this is that Sean McVay is the definition of a big-time coach. When you need to win a game, I don't think there's a single guy I would pick over Sean McVay to be my coach on the sideline. There's nobody better. That's all I'll say.
We don't just get great players squaring off in what should be a really fun battle where we have offensive big plays. We have defensive big plays. We also get a coaching chess match on every side of the ball. That's going to be a super fun game.
I'm looking forward to all of these games. Eyes are going to be glued to the TV for the next 3 days. I've been looking forward to this all week. I think this is the most anticipation I've ever had for a wild card weekend, and I think it's just going to be just as good in the divisional and the conference championships and the Super Bowl. I think we're in for a banner playoff year.
No more Who Wants It Less classics. It's real
Yep.
football time.
I'm disappointed it wasn't Texans Steelers because that would have genuinely been a Who Wants It Less classic. But other than that,
The ghost of Russ versus what's left of CJ Stroud after he's been sacked 50 times. Yeah, that would be great. There would be so much pass rush in that game, it wouldn't even be funny. I think you'd be in trying to get a strip sack.
Yeah, who? It's just TJ Watt versus Will Anderson. Who can get to 5 strip sacks first?
That's our matchup to watch, is players that don't even face off against each other.
I'd be fascinated to see the spread on that game. I think Houston would be favored, but
I would favor him because Tommy Townsend is a really good punter.
Yeah, because ultimately those extra yards in punting make the difference.
Pin him inside.
Well, you got to factor in. Chris Boswell can hit 50 yards. Chris Boswell can probably hit a 62-yarder better than Kymie Fairbairn can.
That's very true. That's very true. Like they always say, special teams, it isn't just a third of the game. It's about 80% of it if we've got Steelers versus Texans. What a great note to end on. Those are our predictions for Wild Card Weekend. We hope you enjoyed this off-campus episode. Going to be rushed out a little bit. Victor, I'm so sorry. I have no idea what the hell is going on with my Wi-Fi. But, yeah, the bright idea of me recording it on my phone. And this has been a great episode. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, stay hard.